My very special guest is the founder and powerhouse CEO of Parasol Alliance, a full-service managed technology provider that dominates the senior living industry. Under her leadership, Parasol Alliance has become a game changer, consistently ranked among the top 501 managed IT service providers in the world for 6 consecutive years, including an incredible number 4 global ranking in 2022. And in 2024, she earned the prestigious title of Best and Brightest CEO in the nation. She is Amber Barden. Welcome to the show, Amber.
Thank you. What a great introduction. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm trying to match your energy. You and I had a conversation fairly recently, and I was blown away by just your dynamic presence. And I said, I got to step up my game if I'm going to talk to Amber. Holy cow.
Well, you're rising to the occasion, Matt.
That's good. I appreciate that. Now, I kind of start us with that. You are this dynamic, energetic person. But as you heard in my intro for the listeners, you run an IT company of all things and in the senior living space of all things. How do you mix these seeming opposites of your dynamism and some of those things that those of us on the outside might consider a little bit more traditional?
So I'm gonna assume you have some sort of nerd bias with IT people. I think there's 2 different parts to that. So what's interesting is I don't actually come from a technical background. My degree is in anthropology. I lived in China for a couple of years teaching English, and I sort of fell into IT by accident. But I actually think the more you talk to people in IT, that's becoming more and more common. And I think that's actually a big benefit to come from a non-traditional technical background. Of course, you also need the mix of that highly technical skill set. When it comes to senior living, so I actually think senior living is one of the most exciting technology fields out there. So we've all heard that the baby boomers are aging. This is a booming industry. It's getting bigger and bigger. We're seeing a lot of change in this industry, especially from the technology perspective. And honestly, I think it's really exciting. So we're starting to see a lot of big players like Amazon and others get into the space and get interested. We're seeing a lot of new companies get started because usually they've had an interaction with someone in the industry. So I think it's a great fit because this is such an exciting time for senior living.
It's pretty cool. And I think that just as you pointed out, I have this view, I'm sure everyone has views, and once you get into the reality is obviously quite different, which is lovely. And I also agree with your point about a non-traditional background. I find non-traditional people to be the most interesting kind of people because you've got such a diverse set of experiences and perspectives that you can bring to otherwise, problems that have always looked the same. So I think it's a real asset.
Yeah, honestly, I see myself as a disruptor. And I think that has been a big part of our success as a company is because I problem solve from a completely different perspective coming from that disruptor and non-traditional mindset.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think your point too about senior living, when I do research in the future of work, I'm looking at a lot of demographics and I came across just it's not even a statistic so much as just which is that in 2030, 100% of boomers will be over the age of 65. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, that's right. And, we're living longer than ever. It's very expensive. A lot of us are staying in the workforce. Technology inevitably is a part of it. And who hasn't seen senior population people who are, working with technology, using iPads, iPhones, walking around? It's a beautiful thing to see, but I'm sure it comes with its challenges, which is obviously, why you're here. Mm-hmm. But it does ask me, or it encourages me to take a look back. What was going on when you first founded Parasol Alliance that you saw something in the market? I know we've touched on it just a little bit, but do you remember the moment when you were like, oh yeah, this is something I need to do something about this?
Well, I think it wasn't just one moment, but, convergence of multiple different factors that came together for me to have founded Parasol Alliance, which has been a little bit over 9 years at this point. So I was working in a senior living community. So I did that for 9 years. There's 2 different 9-year stories here, the length of time I worked there and how long ago I started this business. So I'd been in that industry. I'd worked for a provider and I'd been there for a period of time and worked my way up and got to the point where I was ready to do something else. And my first thought was not to necessarily go out and start a business. And actually this leads a little bit into our culture and how our culture came to be. I decided just to interview for IT directors in the Chicago area, which is where I live. And through that experience is really what led me to eventually start my own company and create the culture we have, because I really struggled, honestly, to find an IT director role that was a good fit for me as a woman and as a mother. I had one company say we've never interviewed a woman before. My kids were really young back then, and so they were sick a lot. And so one of my priorities was that I would be able to have a flexible work environment where I could work from home. And I just ran into a lot of roadblocks with companies I would interview with saying, we don't really understand what you mean. You want to work part-time. And so that all came together at the same time, along with me being introduced to one of the investing partners in my business. And that really all just sort of led to me having this realization that, I think I might just want to start my own company and build the culture and the type of company that I want. And my goal has always been to create the happiest IT company in the world.
It's amazing. And I love a couple things about that. So not only were you undeterred by some of the roadblocks that you were getting, you said, I'm just going to go do something on my own. But I think that knowing what I know about the company, you also set out to create, as you just mentioned, the happiest company in the world, which is saying, not only am I going to go do something in spite of what I was hearing, I'm going to do something that's almost the complete opposite. It's an amazing energy, behind that startup story.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Now, in predictive index terms, you're a persuader like myself, so this won't be a short
Actually, I'm a captain.
You're a captain. I'm sorry. That's right. You're a captain. I'm a persuader. So we're very fast friends. We can be talk a blue streak, but you'll actually get things done where I want to keep talking. So that's a nice mix. But you're a driving force, being a captain like that. And so it's not surprising that you've been leading your company through the significant growth that you've been experiencing. But I wonder if you might share, just for the listeners, what are some examples of challenges, friction, rough spots that just naturally occur as companies grow bigger and bigger? And maybe just tell me a little bit about the trajectory you've had over the 9 years, just to give us some context.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is something I really like to talk about. And I go on a lot of podcasts. I do a lot of speaking engagements, and I often get asked to share my lessons learned as an entrepreneur. And I think it's such a great thing to talk about because we don't always hear the downsides and the struggles that you can go through. Sometimes you see someone who's really successful and you don't know the background of the story it took for them to get there. And, I think that my biggest lesson learned and a biggest challenge it's been with our growth is just the people. And we're a traction EOS company. And I know there's a lot of crossover with Predictive Index in terms of like people analyzers and people in the right seats and Patrick Lencioni's concepts and all that. And, we are a services-based company. And so as of today, we have about 100 employees. And with our growth goals, we're looking to have several hundred in the next few years. But of course, we started from, one or two on day one. And the biggest challenge has just been being able to find the right people. And as the company matures and advances, realizing that some of those people are not still the right people and having to make some of those decisions on potentially making changes in that area, bringing in new people, having to let go of people that have been with you. And that's a really difficult thing, but definitely the longer someone is in the wrong role, the bigger impact and problems that you're going to have from that. So I would say that's definitely been our biggest challenge because we are a service-based company. Our people are our products. And it's something I would advise anyone to really make sure that you are not delaying and you're being very intentional and thoughtful when it comes to your people and what positions they're in.
I think that Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn used to talk about tours of duty and saying, like, let's have this agreement both on the employer side, the employee side, that you're coming on, we're going to do this tour, and it might make sense for us to do another tour at the end of that, or maybe your next tour is actually somewhere else. It seems to me that in the high growth world of startups and growth trajectory businesses, that tour of duty concept might work pretty well, because I could see a situation where either the needs of the organization have outpaced the individual, and now maybe they either need to take a different role in the company or a role in a different company, but the individual also might not want to say something even if they're struggling, because either they don't want to let you down as the founder, maybe they don't want to admit, or they just want to kind of deny the fact that it's just not working, and they feel a little sheepish about that too. I'm sure you've seen it from all different sides.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and this is where I think that having that understanding of what does the organization need, what does the individual provide, where are they naturally suited to do that, where do they have the interest, and that I also have the interest in coaching them into that capability. There's a lot of different ways to make sure that we keep our people with us, but it doesn't just happen on its own. And I think I'm sure you've seen it for yourself as the founder. You continue to evolve, and at the same time, sometimes people hit their limit or their level of interest. Sometimes they're saying, I don't want to go do that new thing, or we've gotten so big that I don't feel the same way I did back when we were in year 2, much less in year 9. And that's fine. And we have to make sure that people understand that that's okay.
And I think that goes hand in hand with the intentional building of your culture, because you have to have a culture that is high accountability, high transparency, and is able to quickly take action. And if you don't have that type of culture, and if you're not very, very intentional about building it, these problems are just going to be worse for you in the long run.
Now, you've always been intentional about your culture. You just mentioned even in your origin story, the type of company you wanted to build. Have you evolved sort of how you think about or even talk about culture at Parasol Alliance over the 9 years and going strong at this point?
Yeah, so we started winning culture awards pretty much in year 2 or 3 of the business. I can't remember exactly which one, but we won our first Best and Brightest Workplace Award 2 or 3 years after we started. And then we've continued to win them every year, multi-city, multi-types of awards. So we're at 28 right now. And, I always thought we were doing really great. Like, our culture is amazing. We're winning all these awards. People are happy. And then COVID happened. And even worse than COVID was the Great Resignation. And we got hit really hard with that. We had 9 people quit in 6 weeks. And again, nobody had anything negative. We're a 100% remote company, and everyone else started going remote, and our employees started being able to get higher paid offers, offers that would allow them to also be remote, which was a big advantage. Which, interestingly enough, now that people are being forced to come back to the workplace, it's worked back in our favor. But we took a step back and we were like, okay, wait a minute. We thought we were doing really great, but what else can we do? And we rolled out 9 new employee engagement initiatives that 1 year alone, to the point where later we actually had to roll back a few of them because some of our employees were like, it's too much. You're asking us how we're feeling, too much. So, I think a lot of the basic principles that we started with our culture are in place. So, for example, we 100% work from home. Our staff do go on site to our client locations, but they're home the other days. We've had unlimited PTO from day one. We do daily team calls. There's a bunch of things that we do that we've always done. But definitely a lot of layers that we've added. And what's been really great, so one of our keys to employee engagement into our culture is we do twice a year town hall meetings. And so this is mandatory. Every single employee gets on a call with myself and HR, and we ask them, what are we doing well? What can we do better? And any other feedback. And they give us very honest answers, and then we take it and we report on that. But what we hear year after year is that our culture and our teamwork and our collaboration is number one, which is pretty amazing considering we're a virtual company. And the fact that we have retained that exact same culture as we've gotten bigger has been really fulfilling and rewarding to see that.
Yeah, it's amazing because as companies grow, and as you mentioned, at distance too, it's even that much more remarkable. So with your town hall meetings, does that mean everybody joins together, or you're saying you meet with them in smaller groups?
They're small groups, yeah. So they're assigned a group to meet with. It's maybe 5 or 6 people in a meeting.
So here's my dumb question of the day. So it's very time consuming to do that. And you're the CEO, the founder of the company. Like, how do you ever even sort of, I don't want to say grouse about it, but think about, like, how do you balance just the time, the reality that it takes a lot of time, but it's obviously critically important. How does that land with you?
Oh, no, it's absolutely critical. I mean, that's one of my most important jobs is supporting our employees. And I'll tell you something else that I do is I meet with every single new employee in a CEO welcome meeting, and I give them information about our company performance, our financials, our history. I personally talk about our mission. I stopped doing that for a period of time, and then I brought it back because I started noticing a disconnect. Mm-hmm. And at the end, I always ask for feedback. And every single person is like, I've never had a CEO do this before. I've never had them get on a call with me, give me all of this information. We publish this information on our SharePoint site so they can go look up our company performance. And I think that's a great way to start off the relationship with a new employee.
Agree 100%. I mean, it's more than just a gesture. You're talking about a level of transparency that most people don't have, regardless of their seniority or how long they've been with the company. And I think that, I always like to say transparency creates trust. And that's what you need when you're working in this remote capacity. You're asking a lot of people, you're moving very quickly in your company. So I could see exactly where they're connecting those dots, and kudos to you for noticing, saying, I feel something's different. Let's bring it back. Mm-hmm. But, on this topic of running fast, as captain, that's what you like to do. And I've known a lot of executives who really, that's one of their favorite things, is to run really fast, of course, but they run the risk of leaving their people behind. So how have you helped your organization, Amber, when it comes to keeping pace with you when you're saying, we got to go fast, but we also don't want to go so fast that we leave our people behind.
Yeah, that is a really great question. And I'm not going to say that's not a challenge. And this is where Predictive Index is such a great tool, because it helps you have that self-awareness of, how you need to interact with other people. So, people listening probably know a captain profile. My A is very high. I want to just, say this is how we have to do it, and let's do it immediately, like you said. But it gives you that self-awareness to see other people's profiles and realize that doesn't work. So you can't just force people to do what you want to do. And again, the captain has the persuasion and the selling piece of the personality. And so I think it's really important to get people to buy into your vision. And I think this is a challenge, and we do a lot of steps to address it, but I think there's always more you can do. So if any listeners have any suggestions, I'd love to hear. But how do you make sure every single person on your team knows what your vision and purpose is, and why do they come to work every single day? So we talk a lot about our values, and how do I know that a help desk person understands what does the value of empathy mean, and how should that impact and guide their thinking when they're dealing with someone on the phone who's maybe upset about something? I think all of these pieces come together, and that you have to be able to have that transparency and take that time.
It's hugely important. I'll just double down on something you're saying there. The self-awareness, we have to have self-awareness, but I think others awareness when we have one-on-one relationships, and then even team awareness, because I do a lot of work with group cohesion and teams where the team dynamic itself is a real thing. And so you mix all these people together, and you're going to get a different byproduct than if you had met with them individually, for example. And awareness is important at every stage and every level and every type of connection. So I can see where it's kind of giving you an unfair advantage to be able to know yourself really well, obviously, but also to know the people and how they might be processing or interpreting, various situations at speed.
Yeah. And I think this is where experience comes into play too. Predictive Index is one tool, and it's good to know what you like to do, but this is just where if you've done something and you failed, I think failure is our biggest learning tool. And it's the way that I personally learn the most. So if you try to go too fast on something and it didn't work out, it lets you know next time, maybe we need to slow down a little bit on this. And that's something I need to do in my personal life as well.
I'm hitting that point too, where I'm thinking to myself, like, going fast isn't always the right answer. Oftentimes it is, but not always. And I think that in organizational dynamics, we like to say that when it comes to people, fast is slow and slow is fast. And sometimes when we're in such a rush to put our new policies or our decisions or our investments into action, if we don't match the pace at which people can absorb them, then we run a different kind of risks, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. And it's also good to have people on your leadership team that have a different perspective. So, there's one person on our team who I know is the exact opposite. He doesn't like change and he wants to go slow. And it's good to take the time and listen to what he is concerned about and be able to address those, because it's a side of it that I might not think of.
Yeah, I find that a lot of times those balancers or it's not that they're wrong, they're bringing a new dimension. And it's not that they don't want to get to where I want to go either, but they're a lot more measured about it. And they may expose some things that I hadn't really fully considered, like, oh, that's a good point. Yeah, I'm glad we just didn't do what I want to do, but we do need to pick the pace and get this done. So it is always that complementary strength type situation. Now, when you think about your organization, you mentioned being 100% remote. You're also multi-state, and I know you're winning awards across states as well. But are there any special techniques or tools? We've talked about it a little bit, but I just wonder if there's anything else that you've really adapted or found works well for you in that 100% remote environment.
I think, there's a lot of things that we do specifically with our remote environment. So when new employees start, they take a survey as part of their onboarding, and they don't really know why they're taking the survey. But we ask them questions like, what are some of your hobbies you enjoy? What's your favorite lunch restaurant? And then we mail them a gift card for their first day of lunch, and then a gift around their hobby that they told us about. So we try to create that connection virtually, even though we're not there in person. We also do daily team calls every single day, the entire company. Of course, not everybody can make it every single day, but it's just we have a theme like, what did you do over the weekend? We do an AI generated prompt just to learn more about each other. Wildcard questions, people really enjoy those. The other thing that we have is we have Slack. Slack is our lifeblood that connects us. I don't think we could live without Slack, and Teams, whatever you want to use. Personally, I like Slack. And so we have a lot of guidance and rules around how to use that. And Zoom is our other tool that we use. use. So for example, we have a camera on policy. If it's an internal meeting, always turn your camera on. When you're remote and you can't see each other, it's a different type of connection because communication is only a small part as words. So to be able to see someone's facial expression and hear their tone of voice, it really adds a lot. And then if we're on with a client, the rule is if they have their camera on, we turn our camera on as well. And then, just going back to some governance with how to use Slack, we have a lot of rules around it. It's not a free for all. For example, I have a policy that I don't want anyone checking Slack after hours because I don't want to have an environment where they feel they have to work all the time. So there's an after hours escalation policy and contact process. So there's a lot of little things you can do to really bring that remote team together.
Yeah, and it's interesting that sometimes we have to do things that are a little bit artificial in a remote environment. We have to do extra things because you just don't have that connection of, we're all eating in the break room together, or we bump into each other in the hallways. That doesn't happen in a remote world. So you're architecting connection and significance into sort of the work. You're wiring it right in, which is smart.
Yeah, I think the biggest mistake companies can make with remote work is to treat it like you're working in an office, but you're working from home, because that's not what it is. You do have to be intentional and come up with different strategies and policies and processes for that.
I like that. There's just a tremendous amount of intentionality coming through your guidance here, both from day one of the new employee, how we're thinking about the policies we set and the expectations, and you're also offering a lot of transparency, but also protection for things like work-life balance. But so you're the founder and the CEO, which means that you get to have a massive set of fingerprints, obviously, on your culture. What advice would you have, Amber, for somebody who's in a different organization, totally different context? Maybe they're a middle manager, they're a team leader. They can't necessarily make sweeping policy changes or investments, but have you had any successes or things that might translate for others, listeners who might be in a slightly different situation, but want to emulate some of what you've been able to do?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I get asked this a lot because I do a culture presentation in many different forms. So I do it at our client conferences, which is a senior living conference. I've talked about culture a lot with them and how they can do it at their communities. I presented to the PMI Executive Council, and a lot of the people there work for these huge companies like Abbott or Avi or Blue Cross Blue Shield. And they're saying the same thing you're asking me, like, I'm just a project manager or I'm just a director of nursing. How do I do this? So I think it is worth mentioning that you do need C-level buy-in to create a comprehensive culture like what we have at Parasol Alliance. I mean, there's no way to get around it. If your C-level is not bought in, you'll never be able to get there fully. But that being said, I do think there's things you can do within your team. So again, I have a lot of additional strategies I didn't really talk about today. But I think there's things you can do just within your team and within your department. So you can do something like the town halls when you do check-ins. You can do recognition and, do things around your values and just bringing, like we have a recognition channel in Slack, and then we do recognitions on our all staff meetings. And, I think there's a lot you can do if you have the intention that you can get people to come along with you. But I also think that the other side of this that no one wants to talk about is, what do you do if you've created this culture, whether for your company or within your team, and people don't want to play along with it and they don't fit within your culture? And I think the problem is that we do have to usually let them go, because one toxic person or one person who's causing problems within your culture and refusing to participate can bring so many other people down. And I got asked at one of our clients, well, we can't even hire people. We can't even find nurses. We can't even find CEOs. How am I supposed to, pair that up with having to let people go who aren't a good fit for our culture? And I had other senior living communities in the room say, you have to do it, and you will build the culture, and you will start to attract the talent that you want when you are intentional about that.
Yeah, it's a leap of faith, but it's so true, right? So if you want to create that sort of magnetic culture that draws in the right people, you can't delay. You got to get it. You got to get to it.
Yeah.
It's amazing when you think about what comes next for Parasol. You mentioned you're going to have grow significantly in terms of your employee account. Like, what else? I guess you're really excited when you think about the future of this amazing business that you built.
Well, I know we spent today talking about our culture and our employees and that side of the business, but I think that also translate into the services we offer our clients. And it is, like I said at the beginning, a little bit of a disruptive service. We do have a very unique business model. And I think that I'm really excited about being able to expand our services to a broader audience across the US and other countries. Because I think it goes hand in hand. So the culture we have and the employee happiness that we have translates to a very high level of service, a high level of service offering that's also very unique, and just our chance to keep doing what we do bigger, better, and more.
Nice. Oh, I love it. I love it. I love the intentionality you shared with us today so far, and just how it helps you really build not just a successful business in terms of your growth, but also an environment that people can come in and feel a part of something and really thrive. It's very, very impressive. I love it.
Thank you.
One thing I want to do is shift gears real quickly. I want to play a trivia game. We talked a little bit about technology here, but I'm going to have AI pose us a trivia question. I call it, "Are we smarter than AI?" We're going to find out. And I saw recently one of your LinkedIn posts that you're big on solo travel. And you recently made a visit somewhere, I think it was the Azores off the coast of Portugal. So I'm going to see if we can get a question about Portugal. I don't know anything about Portugal, so you might have to carry us on this one. We're going to find out. Here's our trivia question. What's the capital of Portugal? You might have even flown in there.
Isn't it Lisbon?
It's got to be Lisbon, right? So listeners, if you're playing along at home, lock in your answer. We're going to find out if Lisbon, that's our answer. Ding, ding, ding. Great job. Absolutely right. Amber crushed it. Look at that. There you go. But Amber, I'm going to ask you an even better question than that silly one, which is, where can my listeners go to learn more about you and about Parasol Alliance?
So they can go to our website, parasolalliance.com. We also have our own podcast called Raising Tech, which is all about senior living technology. So raisingtechpodcast.com. And then I also have a website, amberbarden.com.
I love it. Listeners, I'm going to have those links for you in the show notes. You're only one click away from learning more about Amber, all the great work that she's doing and her team over at Parasol Alliance. And we'll have a link to the podcast as well. Amber, thanks so much for spending some time and sharing your insights today. I really appreciate it.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.